will lead us in the singing of our national anthem.
Président. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras c'est porter l'épée et c'est porter la croix, ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for this. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Que l'on ouvre les portes. Let the doors be open. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to pay tribute to the late Dr. Pawan K. Singhal, a champion of medical research and education in Winnipeg. Throughout his distinguished career, Dr. Singhal was known for his dedication as a researcher, educator, mentor, and community leader. Serving as a professor at the University of Manitoba and as director of the Institute of Cardiovascular Sciences, Dr. Singhal's contributions to medical research in Manitoba are matched by few. His passing will be mourned by his friends and family, by countless colleagues and students, and by Canada's scientific community. Dr. Singhal will be remembered as a compassionate man who cared deeply for his family and his community. He was a generous and long-standing contributor to the St. Boniface Hospital Foundation and a devoted volunteer with the Hindu Society of Manitoba. My condolences to the friends and families of a true Manitoba hero, Dr. Pawan K. Singhal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to Martin Naundorf, who farmed near St. Paul. He passed away on June 2nd at the age of 80. He was known as a man of few words. He wore his heart on his sleeve and was proud to be a dedicated volunteer. He worked tirelessly to improve the lives of others. Martin served as president of Maleg's Haying in the 30s, a completely volunteer-driven cancer support society that provides financial aid for transportation, fuel, and lodging to families of loved ones going through cancer treatment. Since 1999, it's raised more than $6 million and assisted more than 5,000 families across Lakeland with every single cent going to the people they help. Martin's motto was that every day we are blessed with a sunrise and a sunset, and believe that a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love is all you need. Our thoughts are with Martin's family, his many loved ones, and his community today. May we all live our lives with the same grace, selfless dedication, and love for life that Martin did, and may his memory be eternal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
This Seniors Month, I'd like to recognize the Canadian-Japanese Cultural Centre in my riding of Hamilton Mountain. Founded after the Second World War, CJCC members initially gathered in homes and churches until they established their centre on Hamilton Mountain, where I'm proud to say it still thrives today. Thanks to the New Horizon for Seniors program, the CJCC was able to improve accessibility, allowing for more diverse participation in programs like the Japanese tea ceremony, Japanese language classes, and Ikebana, the Japanese art of flower arranging. I recently tried a class and it was so engaging that I bought my own kenzan to practice Ikebana at home. These types of experiences are why the CJCC makes our community richer and why it needs to be accessible for everyone. And thanks to our funding for the improvements, the Centre recently welcomed back a member who is 102 years old. The Canadian-Japanese Cultural Centre is an integral part of Hamilton, and I look forward to visiting again very soon.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's official. The Stanley Cup is coming to Amos this summer. And it's all thanks to the excellent work of Nicolas Roy, a great centre, a little guy from our region who came out of the forest sector, who will see his name engraved forever on the renowned trophy that he won last night with his teammates from the Vegas Golden Knights. It's been 30 years, Mr. Speaker, since a hockey player from Abitibi-Témiscamingue has raised the emblem of our national sport. I'm also proud to highlight the achievements of two other hockey players from Quebec, Jonathan Marchessault, who won the Conn Smythe Trophy as his team's most valuable player after racking up more than 1 point per game throughout the playoffs. A sign of his legendary perseverance, he became only the second player in history to win that trophy without having been drafted. Congratulations also to the fighter William Carrière, who overcame a serious injury to contribute to this victory. Mr. Speaker, with the hard work of our three Quebecers, these magical moments are memories that are engraved in our collective mind and once again give us an opportunity to be proud to be Quebecers. Bravo. The Honourable Member for Laval-Les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a welcoming place where everyone can develop their talents and their vision of the world. Mr. Fred Jalbout is the embodiment of a dreamer whose hard work is matched only by his success. He holds several Guinness records. He's the founder and president of Seiko. He has created an environmentally friendly LED lighting company, a company that has worked with world-renowned artists such as Celine Dion, Elton John, the Rolling Stones, U2, and Taylor Swift.
The Burj Khalifa proudly displayed its work on its endless structure a few years ago, just like the Sophie Stadium in Los Angeles, as the company will soon unveil its latest groundbreaking project with the new cutting-edge technologies and the world's largest video screen surface. Enfin,
Mr. Jalbout is also very involved in his community and works with, among others, the Montreal Children's Hospital and the Cedars Cancer Foundation. He is a source of pride for the Lebanese-Canadian community and an inspiration for all young inventors and entrepreneurs. Long live Canada and long live Lebanon. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Haldimand and Norfolk.
Last week, many Canadians were subjected to poor air quality from wildfires across this country. However, in my community, many suffer from terrible air quality every day. While visiting one of my constituents in Langton, Norfolk County, I sat in their backyard and my eyes were burning. They were burning from the horrible methane and hydrogen sulfide venting from orphan gas wells that were drilled by companies, some over 100 years ago, and many of these companies no longer exist. Homeowners, most of whom were not even born at the time that these wells were abandoned, are now left to deal with the fallout. Communities and landowners are not able to deal with the 27,000 orphan wells in Ontario that pose an environmental and public health risk. In 2021, in Chatham, Kent, an orphan well exploded, destroying a building and injuring 20 people. I'm calling on this government to stop ignoring this problem and to ensure clean air, clean water, and safe communities for my residents of Haldimand Norfolk.
The Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Mr. Speaker, on June 12, 2023, Waterloo Region cheered on Jamal Murray of the Denver Nuggets as they captured their first NBA championship. Jamal, like me, was born in Kitchener, Ontario. Jamal played at the Stanley Park Community Centre, and it was clear even then that he is an exceptional basketball player. In the Waterloo region, it was no surprise that Jamal averaged 26.1 points per game, the highest ever by any Canadian citizen. After all, a Canadian invented basketball. Jamal Murray is the 9th Canadian to win an NBA title. He is the 4th player to average 20-plus points and 10-plus assists per game in the finals, the 3 before him being Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James. On behalf of the Waterloo region in Canada, thank you to Jamal's family, Roger, Sylvia, and Lamar, and to NBA champion and superstar Jamal Murray. You have made Waterloo region and Canada proud. Keep being you and doing what you do. Congratulations.
The Honourable Member for Humber River, Black Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to celebrate two remarkable milestones. First, I want to congratulate Liam Tran on reaching the magnificent milestone of his 80th birthday. Lim Tran, your journey through 8 decades has been a testament to resilience, wisdom, and the beauty of a life well lived. Your dedication, kindness, and commitment to our community have touched the lives of countless individuals, inspiring us all to strive for greatness. Secondly, my warmest congratulations to the Vietnamese community of North York for working in our community for over 30 years. This remarkable organization has been a beacon of hope, support, and unity for our Vietnamese seniors. It has provided a platform for connection, cultural preservation, and the sharing of experiences. On behalf of the Humber River Creek community, I offer heartfelt congratulations to Lim Tran for a happy 80th birthday and the North York Vietnamese Seniors Association continued success in their noble endeavors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Langley Aldergrove.
Mr. Speaker, the budget adds more than $60 billion in new deficit spending, meaning more taxes, more inflation, and higher interest rates. To quote former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley, the government is stepping on the gas with new spending while the Bank of Canada is stepping on the brakes with higher interest rates. And Mr. Speaker, ordinary Canadians are getting caught in the middle, like Jeff from Langley, who wrote to me, "I thought I had been doing everything right to provide my wife and 2 small children a comfortable life. I'm absolutely petrified that when my mortgage comes up for renewal, I'm not going to be able to afford it." So, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are out of money. This government is out of touch. Only Conservatives can bring home a government that works for the people who work. It's time to bring back the common sense of the common people.
The honourable member for Whitby.
Speaker, today I want to recognize 2 organizations that are making Canada a healthier and happier place by fostering and supporting human connectivity through face-to-face social connections. OOT is a Whitby-based social enterprise that launched on Monday, and co-founders Tiagi and Paul developed a social media platform to help people more easily find others with common interests so they can connect face-to-face. Through their business, they are fostering a sense of belonging and combating isolation and loneliness. Gen Well is a registered Canadian nonprofit organization and is leading Canada's human connection movement as a grassroots community-led initiative. The Gen Well project has been working since 2016 to share essential resources, and in collaboration with the Canadian Alliance for Social Health and Connection, they are leading the development of Canadian social connection guidelines. As the world emerges from the global pandemic, the Gen Well project and OOT continue to forge ahead, ensuring that Canadians understand that social connection is just as important as to our health as nutritious diets and an active lifestyle. As Pete Bombachi says, it turns out the best medicine for people is people.
Honourable member for Coast of Bay Central Notre Dame.
Insulting. That's how the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador describes Ottawa's approach to carbon tax. Atlantic premiers have long called for Ottawa to re-examine the policies of this Liberal government that will result in a heavier cost burden for the people of Atlantic Canada. The PM's close friend, Premier Fury, said, "I take great exception to the federal minister. It's a false dilemma, and it's as insulting to us as it is simplistic." On July 1st, Atlantic Canadians will pay an extra 20 cents per litre for heating fuel as a result of Carbon Tax 1. On that same day, Carbon Tax 2.0 will add another 20 cents per litre to diesel and heating oil, 17 cents per litre to gasoline, and 12 cents per litre to propane. So those who heat their homes with oil will be slammed with a total of 40 extra cents per litre.
Exactly right.
If this Liberal government won't listen to Atlantic Canadians, then there's one thing left to do. Get rid of this Liberal government.
The The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
The finance minister said she didn't want to pour fuel on the fire of inflation and that she would balance the budget by 2027. But like all NDP Liberal promises, this government did a massive flip-flop with their failed budget, admitting deficits are here to stay as they add to the debt and fuel further inflation. Random Liberals like Mark Carney say inflation is a domestic issue, and former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley said government spending fuels inflation. The debt-fueled inflation made interest rates rise, and now homeowners are at a risk of defaulting on their mortgages. Canadians have as much debt as the entire GDP, and the IMF warns Canada is the most at risk of a mortgage default crisis in the G7. The NDP continue to prop up and support the Liberals, indebting struggling Canadians further. Maybe instead of going woke and virtue signaling, these NDP Liberals should rein in government spending and rewrite this failed budget so Canadians don't go broke and start losing their homes this summer.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member,
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to highlight a true local success story from my region, the 25th season of the Circuit du Paysan. The Circuit du Paysan is key to developing tourism in our region. It creates a link between the various attractions, sites, and local producers, artisans, and artists. It contributes to the growth of our local businesses. I tip my hat to all those who believed in it from the beginning and who've worked to set it up and ensure its continuity, including my friend Michel Charbonneau, former general manager of the Centre Local de Développement des Jardins de Napierville, and the creator of this incredible way to promote our region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, the international development sector in Canada is led by incredible women. Women like Lauren Ravan and her team at Oxfam Canada, who shared their work on how to improve the lives of paid and unpaid care workers in Canada and around the world. Like Anna Vogt and the international program representatives from the Mennonite Central Committee, who are in Ottawa to share MCC's work building peace globally. Like Janice Hamilton, who heads the Fund for Innovation and Transformation alongside the folks at the ICN, who are testing innovative solutions for gender equality in the Global South. These leaders are changing the world, but Mr. Speaker, they need the government to support their efforts. They need the government to reverse the 15% cut to official development assistance and to finally deliver the promised feminist foreign policy. When we make women and girls the center of our efforts, ensuring women are at the table for peace talks, acting on climate change, which disproportionately affects women and girls, and empowering women and girls to determine their own health and education priorities, we make a real difference for everyone, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hello, Dad. I would like to wish the people of Terrebonne all the best as they celebrate their town's 350th birthday this year. Since its foundation in 1673, Terrebonne has been marked by the construction of a flour mill, then by the arrival of the textile industry, and it's thanks to people like Charles Aubert de la Chesnaye, Calixte Gauthier, Louis Lecomte Dupré, and Joseph Masson, who instilled an entrepreneurial spirit from the very beginning, which has endured to make us today the 10th biggest city in Quebec. I invite all to take advantage of the 350th anniversary festivities and to discover what Terrebonne has to offer, such as Ile des Moulins and the magnificent Old Terrebonne, where I'm lucky to have my constituency office. The wonderful team at Coopération 350th has organized wide-ranging and diversified celebrations. I'd like to thank them for all of their efforts and for the heart they've put into this historic year. Happy 350th anniversary, Terrebonne.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Public Safety is accountable for the actions of his staff and his department. Last week we learned that Canada's most heinous criminal was being transferred from maximum to medium security prison. This is a slap in the face to the victims and their families. The minister claimed he was not aware, but his claims just don't add up. We know that on March 2nd, the minister's office was informed that this transfer would happen. And on May 25th, his office was informed again that this transfer would happen. And on May 29th, the transfer did indeed happen. The minister is either misleading Canadians or he is recklessly incompetent in carrying out the duties as minister. The minister must take responsibility for his inaction and his actions. The Minister of Public Safety must resign.
Prescott Russell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in the House to recognize the ALS Awareness Month. It's a moment.
Je vais demander, je ne sais pas ce qui s'est passé, mais...
I'll ask, I'm not sure what's going on. It was a bit loud. I will ask the member to start again, please. The Honourable Member for Glengarry Prescott Russell. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize ALS Awareness Month. It's a moment to think about a cause that affects the lives of many Canadians. ALS is a progressive terminal disease which affects the nervous endings of the brain, which leads to a loss of muscular control.
3,000 people live with this debilitating illness, with 2 to 3 Canadians diagnosed with ALS every day.
These statistics highlight the need to continue moving forward with research and to improve support for patients and those who help them, and to raise awareness amongst the public of this illness.
Behind these numbers, in their honor, in recognition of all Canadians affected by ALS, we need to continue a future without ALS. Thank you to all the researchers who have dedicated countless hours towards developing treatments for this disease. Your work means everything to the ALS community, and I sincerely hope and wish you tremendous good luck in terms of finding a treatable disease for ALS. Merci.
Well done.
Questions, question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Toute une génération de femmes.
An entire generation of women will have to relive the trauma of Paul Bernardo with the news that this government moved Paul Bernardo, that monster, from a maximum security facility to a medium security facility. He will be able to have visitors. He'll be able to interact with other people. The Minister of Public Safety said that he was shocked by the news. We now know that he'd been aware for 3 months. So, what he said was false. Will he resign? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was shocked. I was shocked because I was informed about this on May 30th. The day after Mr. Bernardo was transferred to a medium security institution. It was a mistake within my office. I will take tangible action now. We will always defend victims' rights. I will communicate with representatives of the families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. We will always stand up for their rights and all victims' rights. The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Of Canadian women have to relive the traumatization of hearing Paul Bernardo's name. They all remember his horrific and monstrous crimes. That they learned that this government decided to free this monster from maximum security prison and allow him to go to medium security, where he'd be able to interact with other people, have visitors, and enjoy other liberties. Now, this minister claimed this was all a big surprise to him. However, we learned today that his office knew in early March and was informed again in May. In other words, he did know, and what he said was false. Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. As I said earlier, I was informed on May 30th, the day after Paul Bernardo was physically transferred to a medium security institution. And at that time, I took immediate action expressing the concerns of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French to the Commissioner. There is an internal review process. I have also made it clear to my staff that this should have been briefed immediately. Corrective steps have been taken. I have dealt with it, and we will now always defend the rights of victims.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, now he's throwing his staff under the bus. His office admits that they found out on March the 2nd, 3 months before the minister claimed to be shocked by the news. If his staff had really kept a secret from him of this enormity, he would have fired them a long time ago. But he hasn't, because he knows, and they know, that he knew way back then. So will he do the only honourable thing that is left for him to do, and resign?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, I invite the Leader of the Conservative Party to repeat that allegation outside of the House. I will absolutely reject it. I knew on May 30th...
Order. 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 I'm going to ask the members to take a deep breath. I know some of the topics we discuss in here are very emotional and we get carried away, but I'm going to ask everyone to take a deep breath and allow the minister to answer so that the honourable member of the Leader of the Opposition can hear the answer. The honourable minister, please continue. You have 22 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, it is the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada who misleads this House when he impugns my knowledge before May 30th. I have made it absolutely clear that that was the day on which I found out. I have taken corrective steps internally with my office, an office for which I am responsible for, to this Parliament, to the Canadian public, which is why immediately upon knowing that fact that he was transferred to a medium security institution, I raised it with the Commissioner. I've spoken with the representatives of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and we will always defend...
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, first of all, I have stated all of these things outside of the House of Commons, so whatever threat he's trying to make, he can act on. But more important than that, he did not act. His office knew on March the 2nd. He expects us to believe that his staff just forgot to walk down the hall and inform him that perhaps the most notorious killer in Canadian history was being moved out of a maximum security penitentiary to enjoy more luxuries and more freedoms in a medium security penitentiary. Finally, he has the power now to designate mass murderers all to go into maximum security prisons. He could have done that weeks ago. Why hasn't he done it, and why hasn't he resigned?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada lays out a prescription for political interference which foreshadows what Canadians would get with a Conservative government. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the independence of those decisions, and when I became aware of the fact that Bernardo had been transferred to a medium security institution, I raised it with the Commissioner. I raised the concern.
I'm going to have to interrupt again. I mean, it's getting way out of hand. I just want everyone to take a deep breath. The Honourable Minister, you have 20 seconds.
Say you're sorry. Mr. Speaker, in the questions that are posed by the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Canadians know they will get a prescription for political interference. On this side of the House, we're doing it the right way. Today, I will be issuing new ministerial instructions to the Correctional Services of Canada to make sure that they put victims' rights at the centre of decisions to transfer, that they inform victims' families before those transfers take place, and we will always stand up for their rights.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is the legitimate power of a public safety minister to issue directives about classes of prisoners. The former public safety minister, Ralph Goodale, did that about prisoners suspected of having contraband. That's right. That is normal. That is a power that the minister has today. He could classify all mass murderers as requiring maximum security detention. That is a decision he could make now. It is a decision he could have made on March the 2nd when his office became aware that this monster was being transferred out of maximum security prison. Why, given that he has not done that and because he has misled this House, will the Prime Minister fire him?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada did not hear my last answer. We will be issuing new directions to the Correctional Service of Canada to ensure that they put victims' rights at the centre of these decisions, to be sure that they inform victims' families before these transfers take place, and to be sure that I am directly notified on a go-forward. What did they get with Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, the last time they were in government? Cuts to the Correctional Services of Canada in the amount of $300 million in their last year of government. That's the difference between what Canadians get with Conservatives and what they will get with our government.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, the government must launch an inquiry into Chinese interference, and before the end of the session. The government seems more open, but we're not making any headway in reality because the government is refusing to be clear about their intentions. It's because of an interesting word, one that starts with P. When we talk about inquiry, the government talks about public process, but no matter how hard I try to figure it out, I can't figure out what a public process is. And I'm afraid the candidates for the inquiry don't know what it means either. But you know what is clear and even defined by a law. A public commission of inquiry, that would be clear. So why not just announce a public independent commission of inquiry? Everyone wants it. That's where we're at, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question. I share with all parliamentarians the desire to decide on the right process. Now, Mr. Speaker, a public inquiry has always been an option on the table, but we need to find the right way to do this work. We need to do so in a way that protects highly confidential, secret information. And we also want to restore Canadians' trust. That's what we want to do, and we hope to do so with the support of the opposition. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Public process again. Mr. Speaker, it's not easy to get facts out of them. When we talk about an inquiry into interference, it's like the government is playing a game of not yes, not no, but it has to say yes. They need to say yes because it's just too important. The government has a duty to launch this inquiry before the end of the session. In order to do so, the government must first announce the format of the inquiry, which should be a commission, and two, ensure that the commissioner is truly independent. No one will accept the position of commissioner if the government keeps its intentions secret. So, public and independent commission of inquiry. One question, yes or no? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I said yesterday that we appreciated the Bloc Québécois letter. It was an important step in reaching consensus among parties with regard to the best way to move forward. Now, the colleague says he wants a public independent commission of inquiry. Maybe he didn't hear me. I said that that is an option on the table for the government. That said, Mr. Speaker, we do need to define the terms of the public inquiry. We need to define and determine the process the right way. We need to determine how we're going to protect confidential information, what the timelines will be, and who the right person should be to lead this inquiry. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Office of the Public Security Minister. We just have found out that his office was aware of the transfer of Paul Bernardo out of maximum security 3 months ago, but the minister claims that he only knew about it on May 30th. If the minister can't keep his house in order, how is he going to keep the country safe? When will the minister stop waiting beside a fax machine and start checking his emails for these serious updates?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Sir, I want to thank my colleague from the NDP for his question. As I said earlier in this chamber, that I was notified on May 30th, the day after Paul Bernardo was transferred to a medium security institution. I have taken corrective steps to deal with the issues within my office, and going forward have indicated that we will be issuing new instructions to the Correctional Service of Canada to put victims' rights at the very centre of transfer decisions, to make sure that victims' families are notified, and that is something that I will continue to be focused on every day. That is defending victims' rights.
Well, member for Burnaby South.
The problem doesn't end there. Le directeur du
The director of CSIS confirmed in committee that his department had indeed informed the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, when he was Minister for Public Safety, of the information concerning the member for Wellington Halton Hills. I quote the director. He said, "I shared the information with the Department of Public Safety with very specific instructions to share it with the minister." So, can the minister confirm to this House that he is now able to check his emails?
Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Speaker, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to clear up a misunderstanding the member opposite appears to have. Mr. Speaker, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, the public safety officials, and Director Vigneault have all been very clear. Ministers and their offices do not have direct access to top-secret electronic networks. Mr. Vigneault did not send his note to me, nor did he notify me that the information had been sent. Director Vigneault had many opportunities to brief me, and unfortunately never briefed me on the contents of his note.
L'honorable député de Bellechasse.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, when we found out last week that serial killer Paul Bernardo was being transferred out of maximum security, the Minister of Public Safety said he was surprised. But according to the CBC, staff in his office knew about the transfer for 3 months. So this is incomprehensible. If ministerial responsibility means anything to the minister, he should resign. Will he? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, as I stated, I was shocked by the Correctional Service of Canada's decision to transfer Mr. Bernardo. I was informed of that decision on May 30th. I took immediate action, corrective action in my office because I take my responsibilities very seriously. We will continue to insist on victims' rights. We will protect victims. I've had good conversations with the representatives of the French and Mahaffey families, and we will work together to protect victims. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse is Jamel Lévy. Yes, but can you imagine the anxiety, the anguish, the sadness that the victims' families found out that the minister had known about the transfer for 3 months and hadn't done anything? It makes no sense, and it's irresponsible. This minister has lost all credibility when it comes to protecting victims. He needs to resign now. Will he resign, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, my colleague is incorrect. I found out on May 30th, as I've said many times now. I am taking action. I will provide new instructions to correctional services. Correctional services should inform victims' families before making the decision to transfer. They should also directly brief me as Minister of Public Safety, and we will always stand up for victims' rights.
The Minister of Public Safety told Canadians that he relied on the advice of law enforcement to implement the Emergencies Act. That was false. He told Canadians that the Beijing-run police stations in our country were closed, and that was false. And then he told Canadians that he didn't know about a child rapist and murderer, Paul Bernardo's transfer out of a maximum security prison. He stood in front of the victims' families and acted shocked. He knew for 3 months, and now he's throwing his staff under the bus. So which staff member did he fire?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, you're absolutely right. I stood with the families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey because I have great care for them, as do all Canadians. That's why I called the Commissioner to express my concerns. That's why she's conducting a review of the decision. That's why I'm issuing new instructions to the CSC. The Honourable colleague refers to the Emergencies Act. I will always defend this government's decision to invoke that act. While we were working around the clock to restore public safety, what were the Conservatives doing? What was the leader of the Conservative Party doing? He was serving up Timmies, Mr. Speaker. In this side of the House, we will always defend law and order.
Well, member for Thornhill.
If he claims he doesn't read emails, if he claims he doesn't get briefed by staff, if he claims he doesn't get briefed by his officials, if he claims he doesn't tell the Prime Minister anything, what does he actually do here? He told the families of Paul Bernardo's victims that he had no knowledge of the transfer. He pretended that he had no idea. He re-victimized the families of the victims, and he doesn't have the trust of Canadians. His own caucus can't even look up at him. Minister, there is only one option: resign.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the events that occurred
Government House Leader, please.
Mr. Speaker, the horrific events that were a result of the absolutely heinous crimes by Paul Bernardo are something that are felt viscerally, I would say by every single Canadian. That what the minister has stated, this is a decision that was made by Correctional Services Canada, which acts independently. The minister indicated that when he became aware of it, he indicated to Correctional Services that he did not find that decision acceptable, asked for it to be reviewed, and we also have asked for take a victim-centered approach going forward in corrections, and I want to work with the party opposite on that because I know they care as well.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, this is a pattern of misleading behaviour from the minister. That is the problem here. For example, he misled this House when he said he wasn't banning hunting rifles. That was false. He was banning hunting rifles. He misled hunters, he misled farmers, he misled Indigenous Canadians, and he was forced to back down on that as a result. But he broke the trust of hunters and firearms owners, Mr. Speaker, and he will never get that back. How can the Prime Minister have a Minister of Public Safety that can't be trusted?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I rise once again because I think that we are all unified in our horror of these crimes. And I think that we're all unified in our desire to make sure that the victims, not only here but in every instance, are protected. And that's why I think the minister's offer to have a conversation about how we can use this to instruct a more victim-centered approach in our corrections is the right approach. And I would invite the opposition to participate in that discussion. I think the minister has been clear that the decisions made by Correctional Services Canada was one that we do not support and have asked them to review.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think the member is listening to the exchange going on here. The minister also claimed that the illegal Beijing police stations operating in Canada were closed, but that wasn't true either, was it, Mr. Speaker? These police stations not only violate our sovereignty, but they threaten the security of Chinese Canadians. It is issue after issue with this minister that he continues to mislead the public. It is critical that the Minister of Public Safety, above most ministers, has the trust of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and yet he has repeatedly misled Canadians on issues of public safety. How can he be trusted to keep us safe when we cannot trust a word he said?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague across the way is not the final arbiter of trust. It is Canadians, and we are working hard every single day to protect public safety. We've introduced Bill C-21, which will take AR-15 style guns out of our communities. The Conservatives want to make those types of guns legal again, Mr. Speaker. My colleague refers to the so-called police stations. The RCMP have repeatedly confirmed that they have taken disruptive action to stop foreign interference in relationship to those so-called police stations. And on the matter of Paul Bernardo, Mr. Speaker, there's an internal review. We're working with the families. We will always stand up for victims' rights.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, foreign interference is ongoing. Meanwhile, the government continues to stall, still wondering what to do after the special rapporteur fiasco. The government is incapable of taking the first step, which would be to announce whether or not it intends to launch a public and independent commission of inquiry. This brings to mind the wise words of Talleyrand, who said, "There's only one way to say yes, and that is yes. All the other ways mean no." So, Mr. Speaker, is it yes for an independent public commission of inquiry? The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to repeat the answer I gave another bloc member a few moments ago. We have always said that Canadians and parliamentarians and the country as a whole would benefit from a public process which will follow the report and recommendations of Mr. David Johnston. We have the opportunity to work together to determine what type of process we will have, as well as who will lead the process, the terms of reference of the process as well. I look forward to continuing to work with opposition parties. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Mr. Speaker, for nearly 4 months now, when it comes to Chinese interference, the government has been giving us a pro-seminar on how to buy time. Now, almost 4 months later, we're back to square one. We have no more time to waste, Mr. Speaker. If we want the Commission of Inquiry to be able to shed light on interference before the next elections, and with our summer recess just around the corner, we have to start the inquiry now. Time is running out, Mr. Speaker. Will the government finally announce a public and independent Commission of Inquiry? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, I agree with our colleague when it comes to the importance of taking action quickly. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Hopefully, the opposition parties and the government will be able to agree on a process by next week. It would be in the best interests of Canadians that we get that work done. I truly appreciated the letter I received from the Bloc Québécois yesterday. I have had promising conversations with members of other opposition parties, even just today. The work is ongoing, Mr. Speaker, and I feel positive about it.
Paul Bernardo is a brutal serial killer and rapist. He kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered teenage girls. His victims and their loved ones have to live with that grief forever. He traumatized an entire generation, the whole country. 2 weeks ago, that monster got moved out of max security. But 3 months before, the minister was told he did nothing, and now he says he can't do anything to keep this dangerous criminal locked up in max. His whole job is to keep Canadians safe, and he can't or he won't. So when will he name and fire the staffer he says screwed up, or just resign?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is right in her characterization of these crimes. I think that she will find no argument from anyone. Let me say that all of us on this issue, I think, need to work together to make sure that the families are served and that victims are served. The minister has suggested a conversation about a victim-centered approach in corrections to make sure this mistake that was made independently by Correction Services doesn't happen again. And I hope that the member opposite would take up that conversation. I know how sincere she is in her horror of those events. I know she knows I'm sincere in mine.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
But Canadians want accountability and action. These ministers, they can blame everyone else all they want, but the truth is their policies endanger Canadians, and it's a habit. The Liberals soften sentences for kidnapping, sexual assault, and rape, and let those monsters do time at home among their victims and law-abiding neighbours. Crime has skyrocketed because the Liberals give bail, not jail, to violent criminals. But misleading Canadians is that minister's habit. He said law enforcement asked for the Emergencies Act. That wasn't true. He said all Beijing police stations in Canada were closed. That wasn't true. And he's misleading now, isn't he? We know that. When he says that he didn't know about Paul Bernardo's transfer. So when will he finally be accountable and stop all this deliberate deception and resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
I want to be absolutely clear again that I found out about this decision on May 30th. I agree with my colleague that
I'm having a hard time hearing the answer. I'm sure many other members are as well. I just want to remind some members that they have very strong voices. Maybe they're just trying to talk to someone close to them and their voices are very loud. I want them to be very mindful of the strength of their voices. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said on numerous occasions, I was personally informed on May 30th, the day after an independent decision was taken by CSC to transfer Paul Bernardo. I expressed shock and outrage at the time, along with the families. I should have been briefed immediately by my staff. I have dealt with that matter internally through corrective steps, and going forward, we have new instructions to the CSC coming to put victims at the very center of these decisions. We will ensure they are notified so that we can take a trauma-informed approach.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey White Rocks.
Paul Bernardo is a serial rapist and murderer who targeted teenagers. He deserves to stay in a maximum security prison forever, full stop. If his staff keeps secrets from this minister on serious issues, then this public safety minister has no control over his files. He hasn't fired anyone. To allow this minister to keep his job is to be anti-women, anti-justice, and anti-victim. If these Liberals want to stand with women, tell him to resign.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition wants what they've asked many, many times. I don't know there was ever a point at which they supported the minister, but they don't now, and that's fine. But what we're talking about in the crimes that they are consistently repeating is heinous traumas that were visited upon those families and in an echo way upon every single Canadian. And what I've heard from that minister is an offer to have a conversation about how we ensure that Correctional Services doesn't make a decision like that again, and that we work together on that. And I look forward to constructive offers from the other side, not just...
The Honourable Member for South Surrey White Rock.
Mr. Speaker, those families are suffering over again because of this inaction by this government. That minister makes an art form of spreading misinformation. He said CSIS didn't inform him that Beijing was targeting an MP. Chinese-run police stations were closed. C-21 didn't target hunting rifles. False, false, and false. Now he says he didn't know Paul Bernardo was transferred to medium security. He's known since March. Canadians deserve a public safety minister who tells the truth, and this one that threatens our safety with his deception. Resign.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I won't, because I continue to be focused on the public safety for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I issued ministerial directions to the service to ensure that the elected government would be briefed on foreign interference and parliamentarians. I am going to be issuing directions to the CSC to be sure that this office is briefed directly when it comes to inmate transfer decisions. That is what responsibility looks like, Mr. Speaker. On the opposite side, what are we getting? We're getting dilatory tactics, delay, filibustering, not supporting the budget. That undermines public safety. On this side of the House, we'll be focused on our paramount objective, which is protecting the safety and security of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
We hauled the CEO of Loblaws in front of committee and told him he's got to stop gouging Canadians, because the reality is greedflation is a massive contributor to the cost of living going up. But neither the Liberals or the Conservatives have the courage to even mention it. That's true. Yesterday, it was confirmed in committee with the Groceries Affordability Report that there needs to be more transparency, and yes, the federal government can do a lot more to bring down the price of groceries. So when will this Prime Minister stop protecting billionaires and start standing up for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Tourism.
We stick up for Canadians every day on this side of the House, and that's why our budget has measures in place to make sure that Canadians can actually get through this inflationary cycle. But, Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at what we've done on the tax front. We've permanently raised the corporate income tax by 1.5% on the largest banks and insurance companies. We've put in a Canadian recovery dividend for those banks and insurance companies that made more than $1 billion in profit. And, Mr. Speaker, we've also put in a luxury tax on vehicles and planes. Mr. Speaker, we're making sure that tax fairness is integral to how we approach things in Canada. We'll continue to do that work.
For Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, every election the Liberals campaign on electoral reform. Yet the only thing the Liberals have done is leave a trail of broken promises. Canadians are feeling increasingly disengaged, not seeing their votes represented. People don't want political games, they expect action. The NDP believe all Canadians deserve a voice in our democracy. So my question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Will the Liberals make right on their promises and implement a citizens' assembly on electoral reform?
The Honourable Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I thank our colleague for the question. What we're focused on is working collaboratively, in fact, with the NDP. Her colleague and I have had a number of meetings to talk about how we can implement the agreements in the supply and confidence agreement to make voting more accessible, exactly as our colleague identified, to ensure the greatest number of Canadians can participate in the democratic process, to deal with issues like mail-in ballots, allowing people to vote at different polling stations, ensuring, Mr. Speaker, that our electoral system is safe but accessible also to the greatest number of people in the easiest way. Those are our priorities.
I'd just like to point out to the Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, I realize you have a very strong voice and we can all hear it. I just want you to realize that yourself. The Honourable Member for Don Valley East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that Canada is a top destination for many travelers from around the world. Though we experience cold winters, Canadians are known for their warm welcome. In my riding of Don Valley East, we have a very vibrant Caribbean population whose loved ones from abroad are hoping to visit Canada and spend more time with their loved ones. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as we speak, my Auntie Maria is visiting from Trinidad. Nice. There has been some updates in the visa process here in Canada, and I'd like to ask the Minister of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship to share some of these updates with us in the House today.
Great question.
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question and for his advocacy for liberalised travel policy when it comes to Canada. I'm pleased to share with this House that last week we announced a major change to immigration policy that's going to allow more people to come to Canada visa-free if they have held a Canadian visa within the past 10 years or hold a current American visa, and this applies to nationals of 13 different countries, including Trinidad and Tobago. This is going to allow them to access our country for a $7 application fee, and approval will come within mere minutes. His aunt will be able to continue to visit, and I look forward for more families being reunited and a successful tourism season this summer.
The honourable member for Peterborough, Kawartha.
3 months. 3 months. The Office of the Minister of Public Safety knew that Canada's most heinous criminal was being moved from maximum to medium security. Paul Bernardo is a serial killer, a serial rapist, and without a doubt the most heinous monster of our time. Yet this minister didn't tell the victims' families and pretended to be shocked by the news. Today, Conservatives demand the minister stand in this House, apologize, do the right thing. Just say sorry and resign. If you care about these victims' families, do it.
I just want to remind the honourable members to place their questions through the chair, not directly to each other, and the answers for that matter. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's just to observe that I don't think that casting aspersions about whether anybody in this House doesn't feel absolute horror and repulsion at these crimes. It just isn't a constructive or useful approach to accuse anyone of not caring about these families or these victims. The member obviously knows, just as she cares deeply about what happened in those crimes, so does every member of this House. There's an opportunity to talk about how we can ensure the decision that was made by Correctional Services Canada doesn't happen again, and that is action, and that is an opportunity that we have to take this together.
The honourable member for Peterborough, Kawartha.
The Minister of Public Safety can't even stand in the House and answer the question I just gave him. He can't even look in that camera and say to those victims' families, I'm sorry. Instead, he wants to divert. He wants to blame everyone else. He is the minister. The buck with public safety stops with him, no one else. So enough. Will he resign? And if he won't resign, tell us right now which staff member is going down for not telling him.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure that member and all members in this chamber that I grieve with the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. I said so when I first communicated my shock and outrage at the decision of the CSC. I said so this morning when I spoke to the representative for the families. I think all members can and should empathize with those families, with the families of all victims, and we will continue to do everything that is necessary to put their rights at the very center of those decisions which are taken around the transferring of inmates. That's precisely what I've done today by signaling new instructions to the CSC.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
I remember sitting here 5 years ago when the public safety minister said he would make changes to the prison transfer program when another child killer, Terry Lynn McClintock, was transferred to a minimum security healing lodge. You know, right now, I am struck by the fact that the Prime Minister has only ever fired one person. So I've got to wonder, does the minister think the reason the Prime Minister hasn't fired him, well, he did fire Jody Wilson-Raybould for doing the right thing, is because of Jody's gender?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would say that, again, I've offered many times to have a constructive conversation around specifics about how we can deal with the decision made by Correctional Services Canada. Instead, you know, we're getting into what I would categorize as very partisan territory on an issue that is extremely sensitive, that we're dealing with victims here, that we all care about, and I look across to the member. I know that she cares as much about this as any other member does in the House. So let's have a constructive conversation. I would suggest that victims is not a...
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Respectfully, I would argue the government has had 5 years to have a constructive conversation with this. Since Terry Lynn McClintock was her family was re-victimized when she was transferred to a minimum security prison. You know, my colleagues have already lined down the litany of failures of this minister. It's not just the Bernardo issue today. So, if he won't admit a gendered aspect to the firing in his cabinet, which I think is true, will he at least have the courage to name which one of his staff he's going to make fall on their sword for this issue?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, all of us, unfortunately, have had our lives touched with crime. That is something that, unfortunately, some have to live with, and unfortunately, in the case of these victims, in the most horrific and awful way. The only thing that is gendered about it is, unfortunately, women are more often the victims than not. But having responsible, mature conversations about that and about how we deal with an independent, and because corrections is independent, we cannot direct them. How we create policies that make sure that we have the right outcomes is the conversation that we need to have.
The Honourable Member for Avignon-Le-Métis, Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Director of CSIS confirmed that he had warned the Minister in a memo that a Member of Parliament was being threatened by China. But the note was apparently lost in limbo because the Minister for Public Safety was never notified. Yesterday we also learned that the same bad luck had befallen his public safety colleague. His office had known for 3 months that Paul Bernardo would be transferred from prison, but he was never notified either. Why is it that when it comes to security, everyone knows about these things apart from ministers responsible for the matter? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the former Minister for Public Safety noted that he had not been notified by CSIS, and that is the kind of file I dealt with to make sure that information will be briefed by CSIS as rapidly as possible when there are incidents that have to do with foreign interference. I'm publishing new directives for CSIS to protect the rights of victims. The Honourable Member for Avignon-Le-Métis, Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, this brings us back to the heart of Chinese interference. The Prime Minister is also unlucky with his briefing notes, apparently, that get lost in limbo. He, too, was never warned of the threats against the MP for Wellington-Halton Hills, even though CSIS produced a briefing note and briefs the Prime Minister every week. The information was lost halfway through, as with his 2 security ministers. Mr. Speaker, are all their cabinet ministers dysfunctional, or is it the ministers who manage to know just what suits them? The Honourable Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to intelligence sharing, when there are threats to MPs from abroad, we recognise that there was a shortcoming and we have corrected it. The Minister for Public Safety gave clear instructions. From here on in, this kind of information must be shared, not only with the minister responsible, but also with the parliamentarian who is being targeted. This is a positive change that we have implemented.
Member for Niagara Falls.
Speaker, it's unacceptable that the families of the victims of Paul Bernardo were only informed of his prison transfer after it had taken place. They have every right to be shocked and outraged. But the Minister of Public Safety has absolutely zero excuses, especially when he and his staff knew of this transfer for 3 months. Paul Bernardo should be in a maximum security prison. When will this minister do the right thing? Canadians deserve better. Victims' families deserve better. Will this minister resign?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with one aspect of the member opposite's question, and that is I do agree that victims' families should be notified ahead of these transfer decisions. That's precisely what we are in the course of doing, is issuing new instructions to the Correctional Service of Canada so that we can prevent another situation like that from occurring again. We will continue to put victims' rights forward and front and center when it comes to these decisions, and I agree to work with my colleague opposite who represents the Niagara region, the colleagues on this side of the House, some of whom have been personally and profoundly impacted along with the victim's family, so that we can prevent a tragedy like this from occurring again.
The Honourable Member for Charles-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, CBC reports that the Minister of Public Safety staff knew that Paul Bernardo would be transferred to a medium security facility 3 months before it happened. Neither the Deputy Minister or upper officials were aware. So, can the Minister say who committed the mistake, and has this person been fired? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be clear. errors in my office have been addressed by me today. It is important for us to focus on the rights of victims. And today, I am emitting new directives to correctional services that will put the rights of victims at the heart of our approaches when it comes to transferring or not offenders. This will make sure that in the future, I, as Public Safety Minister, will get information directly when such a decision is made. The Honourable Member for Charles-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister admits that there has been a whole comedy of errors in his office, as we saw in January when the Minister stated that the Safe Third Country Agreement was great for Roxham Road. Hundreds of illegal migrants were coming through, however. 2 months later, however, the Prime Minister and President Biden reached an agreement to close Roxham Road, but the Minister had said that it was impossible to close it. It's a comedy upon comedy of error. So, will they finally fire these people, and will the Minister finally resign? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Minister for Immigration, has signed a new agreement with the United States with two objectives. One, to protect the rights of refugees, which is essential. And second of all, to strengthen the integrity of our borders. That's exactly what we are doing with new investments for the CBSA, $450 million. We will always protect the rights of refugees, and that has been put forward with this new agreement. The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party would have you believe that the abortion debate is over, but it seizes every opportunity to reopen it. Recently, the member for Yorkton Melville tabled a bill to restrict women's rights to reproductive health services. And now, we cannot take this right for granted. Can the Minister tell us what our government is doing to protect the right to choose? The Honourable Minister for Sports. I would like to thank the member for Sudbury for her question and her advocacy on this important issue. I would like to reassure her and reassure all Canadians that we will not allow the Conservative Party, we won't allow them to do sneakily what can be done overtly. They are trying to stop women from having the right to choose. They're trying to gain votes by reopening the abortion debate. It's a shame. It's a shambles in 2023. The Liberal government will always be here to defend the rights of women. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
When Canadians find it hard to feed themselves and pay bills, the Prime Minister disbursed $200 million to the Asia Investment Bank. Now, this bank's head of communications has revealed through her resignation that the bank is controlled by Beijing in order to strengthen the Chinese empire throughout the world with Canadian taxpayer money. Will the Prime Minister claw this money back for Canadians? And will he redisperse it to Canadians? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, like the Deputy Prime Minister stated earlier today, in response to this question, the Government of Canada will immediately put an end to all activities, government activities in the banks, and she's asked the Department of Finance to study allegations made and Canada's position with the Asia Investment Bank. The Government of Canada will discuss this matter with its allies and partners that are members of the bank. The investigation will have to happen rapidly, and we will publish the results.
Conservatives told the Prime Minister that while Canadians couldn't pay for groceries, he had no business sending over $200 million tax dollars to the Beijing-controlled Asian Infrastructure Bank to fund pipelines and roads and bridges over there. Now we've been proven right by the head of communications for that very bank, who's resigned, saying that it's dominated by the Communist Party and being used to build Beijing's empire around the world. The government says it's going to cease operations now, but the question is, where is the $200 million of Canadians' money that he gave that bank?
The Honourable Minister.
As the Deputy Prime Minister said earlier today in response to this matter, the Government of Canada will immediately halt all government-led activity at the bank, and she has instructed the Department of Finance to lead an immediate review of the allegations raised and and of Canada's involvement at the AIIB. The Canadian government will also be discussing this issue with our allies and partners who are members of the bank. The review announced today is to be undertaken expeditiously. No outcome is being ruled out following its completion.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That wasn't the question. Conservatives agreed with Japan and the United States that refused to give money to the Beijing-controlled Asian Infrastructure Bank. We pleaded with the Prime Minister not to throw our money away on this enterprise that was designed to expand Beijing's empire around the world, building infrastructure in other countries. But 200 million Canadian tax dollars has gone into this bank. So I will ask for a third time. Where is our money, and how will we get it back?
The Honourable Minister for Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to repeat that the Government of Canada has halted all activities, all government-led activities at the AIIB, and our government has instructed the Department of Finance to lead an immediate review of the allegations to end Canada's involvement at the AIIB. Mr. Speaker, this review is to be done expeditiously, and no outcome has been taken off the table.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Louis.
Monsieur le Président, hier, le projet de loi.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, Bill S5, which seeks to modernise the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which had not undergone a major overhaul in more than 20 years, was adopted. Parliamentarians spent more than 50 hours working on this bill. The strengthened bill has steps forwards with regards to protecting human health and the environment. Can the Minister for the Environment provide the House with an update on the implementation of Bill S5 that seeks to protect our healthy environment? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for all of his work as chair of the committee, as well as all members of the committee and the Senate, because yesterday evening the Bill S5 was adopted in the Senate. For the first time in Canadian statutes, we add the right to a healthy environment for all Canadians. This is a first for our country. We will work very hard over the next few months to define how this right will be actually implemented in Canadian statutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, my riding is cut in half. Highway 4 has been closed for over a week because of wildfires. With the closure, local food banks are suffering as people are trapped. This is impacting people who are already struggling with food insecurity. They're worried, and many don't know where their next meal will come from. Will the federal government provide emergency funding to local food banks, small businesses, the community, and emergency unemployment insurance to help people cut off by the wildfires?
Yes. The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for a very important question, and I want to assure him I will reach out today to the British Columbia government and ensure that there is close coordination between federal supports and the province's work to serve that community, and we will work with him and those communities to ensure that the people impacted by those wildfires receive the supports that they require. Thank you.
Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, carbon capture and storage is unproven technology. In fact, it often emits more carbon than it captures. Yet this government keeps giving...
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing the question. There's someone shouting just over here. I'm sure they don't want me to name them. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre, from the top, please. From the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, carbon capture and storage is unproven technology. In fact, it often emits more carbon than it captures. Yet this government keeps giving our money to big polluters to experiment with it. $520 million in this year's budget alone. And now we know why. Oil and gas executives helped write our government's own strategy on carbon capture. Will the government stop outsourcing the climate plans to the very industry most responsible for the crisis we're in?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources. Okay, let's give it a second to calm down. I think we're ready. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my honourable colleague, I would certainly say that his technical assessment is simply wrong, and I'd be more than happy to sit down and have a conversation with him about carbon capture and storage technologies. The development of thoughtful policy requires gathering input broadly, including environmental organizations, including Indigenous peoples, including civil society, and including industry. When we were developing the carbon management strategy for Canada, there were 1,500 organizations and individuals that provided input. The advisory group that was referenced by the honourable member included a whole range of people, including Ed Whittingham, the former executive director of the Pembina Institute. And
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable John Reyes, Minister of Labour and Immigration for the province of Manitoba.
Other guests have joined us today. Citizens from across the country for Canadian Armed Forces Day. It is an opportunity to highlight the sacrifices made by all forces members on our behalf.
To draw attention of the members to the presence in the gallery of 5 members of the Canadian Forces who are taking part in Canadian Armed Forces Day today. Captain Sigmund Sort, Captain Hilary Anderson, Sergeant Joshua Ballard, Master Corporal Jude Julien, Sailor 1 Charles Tucker, and Corporal Mathieu